Blessed love and peace in Rastafari. Try not to sweat the cufflinks or the curry stains. That's from years and years ago. That's bleach stains, I think. Anyways, this is preliminary notes to the next session, God willing, of the MSS SMS feed, Sovereign Mindset Solutions. Session number 8, the topic being masturbation is rape. So what I'm sharing here is some preliminary context for this topic, so that the statements can be further optimally processed, understood, recognized, informational, and beneficial, helpful, guiding. So I'm sharing some thoughts, some brief ideas, concepts, understandings concerning this particular topic. And this is shared because of how relevant and necessary it is at this moment in global society. The basic purpose of this is to provide a reminder, to encourage a reminder about the potency, the power that exists within woman, and the power and the potency that exists within man. When people lose that sense of the potency, the power, like the life force, then things like sexual exploitation and additionally become further prone. Let's put it like that. All right, so got my thoughts for a second. Actually, to share this or to provide these notes, I'm actually going to provide some preliminary notes, which is at the risk of prolonging this, but it's beneficial to provide further context. So first, we're just going to go like dive deep to the primordial, like just the nature of universe and God and life. So in that realm, in that understanding, there are two joints. The first joint are the 3 primordial animations. And this is something I recently shared in other recordings, whatever. But the 3 primordial animations, that those 3 are God, devil, and woman. So that's all types of bias. That's all types of perceived subjectivity, but God, devil, woman. Now, the considerations of God and devil is the binary, the yin yang, the binary within man, within each man, within the phenomenon of man. So that's for each brethren in this walk, in this chart of life, all brethren, wrestling with God and devil within oneself. All the projections and the insecurities, everything else, that's all that is. That's all it is. Now, at the same time, woman is observing this wrestling of man with himself, God and devil. And what I observe with women, I am precluded from ever saying that I understand women. I have trust that I will never fully understand women. And I'm not supposed to. We don't have that purpose in this life. But what we do have the purpose of is respecting, understanding, and striving to understand. So what is observed is that women basically simply repeat what women observe men doing and saying. And it can be difficult because at some point man is holy and angelic, and at some point man is demonic, selfish, and devilish. And so when he shows that to a woman, it's in woman's repertoire at that point. Woman observes it, absorbs it, and she's got it for life. So now how she applies it, and additionally, man only has himself to blame. He's going to blame the woman for giving him the fruit. Ha ha, where did he get it from? So, anyways, that's an example of what we're talking about here. I was referencing a narrative within Bereshit, Torah narrative of creation, and the temptation in the garden. So, anyways, God, devil, woman. Those are the three primordial animations. Now, the next joint is tres primordial phenomena: pain, energy, and truth. And I'm just going to let that sit as it is. But that provides, again, some context to understand better the power within man, the power within woman, how those powers are abused, how those powers are beneficial, benevolent, and begetting in a proper way. When we talk about the relationship between man and woman, marriage, joining in one flesh, that is the seed of man joining with the seed of woman. It's beneficial to recognize that within a man, his propensity for physical eternity, for continuing in a material way, in this material realm, samsara, for eternity, the prospect of eternity exists within his seed, for him to have children, and for those children to have children, and additionally, his semen. So that's his life force. It's tremendous, it's incalculable energy that exists within his life force when he starts to produce semen. And the ancients, our ancestors, prophets, and sages teach us how sacred the seed of a man is and not to waste it. And men who have experienced that emission of semen know the depletion of energy, being fatigued, and additionally afterwards, because that's the expulsion of life force. Athletes, when training, boxers, when getting ready for a match, don't have sex when they're trying to be victorious, because they know in doing that they're not wasting, but they're expending their energy, and that's disadvantageous. So it's beneficial to recognize that. Now, the interesting thing is that, and this is beyond just interesting. This is like a whole nother conversation, but similarly within woman, there's the life force within her seed. Now, the difference is that the way in which the seed is emitted from the woman is comparatively involuntary. It's on a monthly cycle with the moon. So she's very much attuned, just intrinsically, naturally, with the rhythms of nature. And there's obviously divine purpose for that. And there's much that can be, and it is to be said and studied and understood about that. And recognizing how that difference between how a man's seed is emitted by a combination of both his own personal volition as well as things that exist beyond his will that lead him to that point. So that's a factor, because those factors that lead him to that point of ejaculation are also essentially him wrestling with himself, particularly when it's done in an unrighteous way, an irresponsible way, a selfish way, just for pleasure, and that's also the element. There's an experience of pleasure for a man in that process, and so all those factors are relevant and influence that experience of procreation, of life force, of the emission of life force, and the mind state, the discipline, the mindfulness in that process, the temptations. So those are some preliminary considerations. Now, this is challenging, so I get wordy in these type of topics because it's very difficult to like talk about this. So, just to review what I just mentioned, particularly the latter part of what I just mentioned, for a woman, the emission of her seed is cyclical. When she starts producing eggs, um, the eggs are emitted on a monthly cycle with a tuning with the cycle of the moon, generally speaking. It's comparatively involuntary. It's there's an instinctive awareness of relationship with nature, universe, social conditions, and all these things that factor into it. And there's it's a painful process. It's emotional, and for a woman, what is observed from a man is that there is an awareness of this is her life force that is being emitted from her, and in that interest of and that guidance of having children, and additionally, there's the consideration of the relationships, the experience, um, the material wealth, and additionally, that is being emitted with her life force. Um, it's not the end of life at that moment, but it's just like a continual like leaking. And that's a very kind of crass kind of description, but it's an involuntary uh, relinquishment of life. And relinquishment suggests a voluntary, but um, um, withdrawing of life gradually, continually, involuntarily. And so there's a mindfulness of that. And indeed, like perhaps an urgency of like, okay, let's make this productive. Let's have a child along these lines. Whereas with a man, when he emits when he has an emission of semen, it's a pleasurable thing. His ego, particularly depending on the consequences, the woman, and additionally, he's guided to think in he's tempted to think less of the implications of his life force, of like of the life, the countless life that exists within that seed that he's emitting, and tempted to focus on just the pleasure of being with the woman, of the ego, whatever words she's sharing with him, and additionally. So it's a different experience, and that factors into the relationship between men and women, and also the uh, the influences, the methodologies of seduction, and additionally, and that's where we're getting to in terms of this particular topic. So in that notion of the relationship and the influences, um, when the virtues of society become loosened, such that men are corrupted by the flesh, and are increasingly hedonistic in terms of just searching for that pleasure experience rather than being responsible in relationship with a woman, caring for a woman, caring for his children, and additionally, and simply striving to experience that kind of affirmation and um, ego boosting, and whatever else, just through those pleasures and conquests, and additionally, um, there's increasing susceptibility to the powers of seduction. And so, all right. In the conditions of today, it seems as though many women have forgotten how potent the fertility and the powers of seduction are within women. And it seems as though many men have also forgotten how powerful and potent are the powers of seduction within woman. Okay. As a brief side note, particularly within recent decades, within recent generations, there's an increasingly within industrial society. There's an increasingly rampant sterilization of women, whereby there's a facade of fertility, where young women, uh, dress in very provocative ways, showing sexual prowess, bosoms, waist, navel, legs, thighs, bathing suits, and additionally showing these surface level elements of fertility um, the readiness of procreating additionally, but it's often simply just a pretext for seduction, of influencing men's thoughts, because often in recent decades and generations, women are actually sterilizing, self-sterilizing, taking birth control in addition, and not able to have children, and wielding that sexual um, power of seduction, for conventional gains, for conventional influence, for money, jobs, admissions to education, and ascension within the hierarchy. So, and in that process, again, self sterilizing so that unable to have children, at least at that immediate moment, and hardening, like losing that flexibility, that gentleness, the softness, that um, within a woman that translates to the nurturing nature of being a mother, of being a more, and suckling a child, being gentle and flexible and patient, in rearing a child, dealing with a child crying, and changing diapers if when kinfolk have diapers, and otherwise. So um, that's again like a brief side note in terms of like the conditions of today in that respect. But what we're focusing here is um, the seduction, the power of seduction, the abuse within seduction, because again, the topic is masturbation is rape. So the important thing to recognize here is that how powerful women are in seducing men. Um, and when we talk about rape, it's an atrocity. In many ways, rape is worse than murder. It's not a comparison, it's not a competition, but it's just to show how severe and how terrible rape is when a man physically violates a woman, particularly in a sexual way. That's an atrocity, one of the worst atrocities that exists in life. So that we have to recognize that. Now, at the same time, there's ways in which women rape men too, and it's different. Um, so the way to recognize that is when a man violates a woman. Okay, and rape is one thing, but then there's also sexual exploitation, um, and sexual abuse, molestation, and all these violations of the body. Particularly, it's not always exclusively the body, but particularly and predominantly the body. These are many of the ways in which a man violates a woman in a sexual way. Um, Very often, predominantly. Now, the effects obviously are emotional, psychological, mental, spiritual, physical. It's comprehensive, but the way in which the abuse is primarily or predominantly manifested or conducted is a violation against the body of a woman. The way that a woman rapes a man predominantly is not a violation of his body directly, it's a violation of his mind. And it's recognizing how powerful a woman is in seducing a man, in affecting his mind without even touching him, without even saying anything to him, just showing him her virility, her fertility, her sexual prowess, the suggestion of intimacy, of sexual intercourse with her in the mind. And that is tremendous influence, and it's tremendous abuse as well. And it's beneficial to recognize that. That is how a woman predominantly rapes a man, through seduction. And again, it's not America comparing of what's worse than worse, what's worse bodily this or mental this, but just to recognize that that is how a woman does it predominantly, raping a man through his mind, violating him through his mind. And there are degrees of it. There's just like there's degrees of physical molestation of a man towards a woman, there's degrees of mental molestation of a woman towards a man, from the point of just um, dressing provocative, showing her bosoms, showing the other elements of her prowess, and distracting him, throwing his mind off, intentionally, maybe. And okay, so well, I'll say that. So this is ancient. This is talk about the art of seduction or the power of seduction. This is thousands of years old, and it's things that kings know for thousands of years. And this is what's articulated in the statement. I'm not trying to get into too much of the commentary, but this is a tactic that men use to conquer other men, particularly other kings, through seduction. Warfare may be ineffective, so it's a matter of finding a woman and finding out something about the man, what his psychology is, and what his weaknesses are, and how a woman can take advantage of that and distract him, make him forget about this military outpost or whatever else. And so these are very actual ways to weaken men through the mind that a woman is less susceptible towards as well. So just again, a woman rapes a man predominantly through the mind, and there's degrees of that type of abuse and that type of molestation, from very comparatively subtle flirtation and temptation to um, outright seduction, um, adultery, harlotry, and additionally. So, um, and the effects of that can be comparatively modest in terms of a slight influence to terrible consequences like suicide, and just making dumb decisions. Uh, anyways, all right. So just recognizing that women have that power, and these things about um, a woman having the liberty to do what she wants to do with this, that, and the other. Everybody has liberty to do what they want to do, but there's always consequences to everything that we do. And the purpose of this is for women to recognize the harms that are caused in being seductive, in being immodest, in displaying sexual prowess, how that hurts men, genuinely, like honestly, it hurts men. Um, in ways that men don't want to acknowledge, in ways that men have difficulty acknowledge, because men are immersed in being in the drunkenness of that. It's a natural response to um, the sexual prowess of women. So it's beneficial for women to recognize that, so women can be genuinely compassionate, um, and additionally, and it's beneficial for men to recognize this, so that men can be increasingly disciplined and mindful, for oneself and for other brethren. So, there. I didn't do any notes for this joint, so I'm trying to remember some of the specific points in mind to share. Um, So that's the basic idea concerning pornography is rape. To recognize that when a man is viewing pornography, um, obviously that's abuse towards a woman, a sexual exploitation of a woman, and she's pained and she's hurt in that process, regardless of how she appears and how she's smiling, whatever else, and whatever type of pornography that she's participating in. So there's that for those who have some type of sobriety is evident. But what's appropriate to also recognize is how much the men are abused in viewing that pornography, because a man in his right mind doesn't want to watch pornography. He wants to be with the woman. He doesn't want to masturbate. He wants to be in a relationship with that woman when he's in his right mind. So the fact that pornography is so pervasive, presumably, shows how effective women are today in abusing and overpowering and raping men in the mind to be outside of the right mindset. One way to look at it, or one way to recognize that, is that if a woman were to display her sexual prowess to a boy who's 6, 7 years old, some people might be able to recognize the harm that's being done in that, the meanness of that, um, and the effect, the negative effect that has on the boy. Some people might say, "Oh, lucky boy," but it's beneficial to recognize that that same harmfulness exists towards a man when a woman does that to a man. And people might say, "Well, the man should protect himself. The man shouldn't look if he doesn't like it." He does. A man's supposed to like that. And yes, he's supposed to protect himself, but a woman doesn't have to be being that abusive towards him to begin with. Just like a woman walking alone at night, and who is abused by a man, um, obviously a man should not abuse her, but at the same time, I mean, I'm trying. All right, it is wrong to say that if a woman, to put blame on a woman, how to put this, a common argument today concerning a woman, when a woman is raped, we don't blame the woman. Now she's there are things she can do to protect herself better, and there are things that she can do to avoid situations where those things are increasingly risky. Um, but it's very callous to put an onus on the woman when she's been abused. Now there are guidances, teachings about what a woman should do in terms of protecting herself, being modest in terms of how she displays, so that um, it's getting twisted here. All right. When a woman is abused by a man, the man is at fault. There are things the woman can do to minimize her vulnerability to that abuse: dressing modestly, being home during late hours, not being by herself out in public, and additionally. So there is an onus, but the guilt, the predominance is on the man who does the abuse. Now, on the flip side, when we look at the abuse of women towards men, the raping of the rape and the molestation that women commit against men, um, we see much less accountability towards the women, being held towards the women who are committing those harms, um, and instead it's not even addressed. But if anything, what is usually and what's often perceived or argued is that a man should be responsible and take care of himself. So um, when a man is influenced by a woman, and additionally, it's considered he should have discipline. He should be a man. He should be strong. He shouldn't be so weak in letting himself be played or manipulated or influenced by a woman. And there's truth to that. I mean, a man is guided to guard his modesty, to be focused, not to entertain lustful thoughts. And additionally, however, when women throw sexuality against the man, it's just it's beneficial to recognize the abuse of that, the guilt of that accordingly as well. And all right, there are certain things that are very clear cut until it is shared. It's still there, it's still clear cut, but the sharing of it can be cloudy. So that's what I'm getting through at the moment. That type of abuse of women towards men is easier to evidence when it's against a boy who is perceived as being less or being further defenseless to be able to protect himself. But it's beneficial to recognize that the mental maturity of a man, the emotional maturity of a man, in many ways, discussably, we can reason about it, is not much further than that of a boy. And a man might have a further experience. He might be further hardened in terms of just like callous towards the ways of the world. Um, but he's in many ways still susceptible to the influences and powers of suggestion and seduction from a woman. Um, that's not he has the responsibility, but and you know what it is. Yeah, seriously, just recognize women are powerful, and women are powerful beyond what women today um, outwardly communicate. Women's sexuality is powerful, very powerful. And with that power, there's responsibility. When that power is used in an irresponsible way, in an abusive way, that's wrong. Um, and that's plain and simple. And when a man is reduced towards abusing himself in watching pornography, in masturbating, in expelling his seed, that is clear evidence of an abuse being happening, and that abuse being caused by the power of seduction from the woman. And this is an ancient thing that our ancestors, prophets, and sages teach us, that warn us about in terms of seduction and temptation and the intentional temptations that are put against man. So, that's the purpose of this joint, to share a reminder of that power. And the purpose of that reminder is to encourage kinfolk to be further responsible and compassionate, honest, and modest with that power. Um, it is easier to remember, it is easier to recognize that power when we have some sobriety, when we have some chastity, when we experience some chastity, and um, we are able to observe the cause and effect of the interaction between man and woman. Um, and when having that sobriety and observing the cause and effect, recognizing the influences and the intentionalities within the interactions. And when we are able to recognize those influences and intentionalities within the interactions, then we are also better able to recognize the abuses, um, the harms that are caused, the harms that are intended, abuse, and the severities of these harms, from mild to severe. And pornography is one of the further severe abuses against men and against women, caused by men and caused by women. And the act of masturbation, whether it's pornography or otherwise, is a further severe consequence of the abuses. So, in the interest of healing, of well being of individuals, brethren and sistren, and as a collective society, of the relationships between man and woman, husband and wife, parents and children, friends, siblings, teachers, students, and further, this foundational relationship between man and woman, husband and wife, deserves sanctity and mindfulness and devotion and honesty about what proper behavior is, beyond individual will and rights and everything else like that. So I think that's pretty much what I'm going to be able to share at this moment in terms of concise, coherent type of consideration in this joint. Um, yeah, I consider throwing some other things in there, but I think it's cloudy enough as it is. So, um, plain and simple, women have tremendous, incalculable power. The powers of seduction, the prowess of women's sexuality, is tremendous. It's miraculous. It's unwieldy. So it's beneficial for all kinfolk to recognize that, to respect that, and to acknowledge the abuses that are conducted within that as well. Men are always responsible for men's own actions. We can't blame nobody else. But at the same time, it is appropriate to recognize um, harms that are caused from each and any side, um, and to optimize the well-being that is shared and that is acted and that is experienced by each and all beings. We're gonna rock it with that. Blessed love and peace to all.